Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for speaking English. It would be a short evening if it was in Czech. I apologize, and thank you to Natalie and her team here for facilitating this evening. Thank you too, Ondrej, for being here.
I mean, thank you, David Mitchell, for being here with us today. We are in Kino Přítomnost, which could be translated as present cinema or now cinema. But tonight we're going to talk about a film that moves from past to distant future in multiple timelines and goes beyond just the present moment. Obviously we're going to talk about the film Cloud Atlas from 2012, which was directed by the Wachowski siblings and Tom Tykwer, the German director. And as you see in the picture up there, it features top acting talent from all over the world, not just Hollywood, but Tom Hanks and Halle Berry and others. And of course, we are going to talk about the book as well, which was first published in 2004. It is perhaps still the best known work of yours. Of course, it
will be on my tombstone, David Mitchell, author of Cloud Atlas. I've seen my tombstone in a vision, and it's there.
And Cloud Atlas is on there.
Okay. Yeah.
Of course, you wrote, I think, 9 novels, if I counted correctly. Ghostwritten, for example, The Bone Clocks, or most recently, Utopia Avenue. And Cloud Atlas, shortlisted for the Booker Prize, won British Book Award for Literary Fiction and Richard and Judy Book of the Year Award as well. Tonight, the evening will be structured into these, basically 20-minute, 25-minute long segments where we will talk about some of the topics and themes of the film, how it was made, the process of the adaptation, for example, how a book can be translated into a film. Also, we will talk about the question of genre and conventions in general, the way the film or the book could be categorized, and also about the motif of connections, which is very important in the film and in the book as well, where some of the blurbs, I think, said that everything is connected in the film. So we will sort of explore this as well. And at the end, we will talk also talk about the film metrics resurrections, which is coming, I think, this December, and that you also participated in, or were a screenwriter actually. So there will be time for questions from the audience as well. So throughout the talk, you will have the opportunity to ask whatever you want, or perhaps something that will include some of the topics we'll talk about as well. So now we will play the first clip from Cloud Atlas, and then we will start the talk and the film and book analysis.
If I could, I try to be a nice, low-maintenance kind of guest, but these lights are kind of like the eye of Sauron drilling into my brain. If anyone can hear me, if you could slightly dim them a little bit, I'd be really grateful. Maybe no one can hear me yet. Oh, thank you. There's a little. There's a person moving around upstairs. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Great. As you were saying before, you were so rudely interrupted.
This is definitely better. Thank you. This clip shows Robert Frobisher, the young composer, and Vivian Ayres, the older composer, sort of collaborating perhaps on this Cloud Atlas sextet, the music that accompanies the film as well. And the film, I think, and the book as well, shows art as this sort of collective creation. And of course, we just saw that the ego is still in play as well, that the individual characters actually try to make the art their own. But I think we should start with, just establishing how, because, the film, of course, is also a collaborative art, and this one was as well. How were you actually involved in the making of this film?
Sure, thank you. And from your introductory remarks, I can see we're going to have some trouble because you say really smart things about the film that I can't disagree with. However, how much was I involved in the film? Both a great deal and really not a lot, and both of those are true. Obviously, I wrote the novel that first Natalie Portman read, and she's a big reader. And a friend of all of the directors. And so she originally was going to be the Sonmi part. But then, as happens with A-list stars, other projects come along, and this took a long time to find the money to make it, and so plans changed. So the book found its way to Lana, I think, first, and then her sister, Lily, and Tom Tykwer, and they're friends. And in the film industry, if you want to spend time with your friends, you essentially have to work with them, because otherwise you never see them because you're busy shooting or in post-production. And these days, as we'll discuss with The Matrix, it's post-production takes forever. 18 months is normal now, and this is in some ways because of the way that digitalization has expanded the menu exponentially. However, I'm now answering a question you didn't even ask. How involved was I? I wrote the book, and all three directors are gifted screenwriters in their own right. I was busy writing other things. I think maybe there was an overture along the lines of, would you like to help write the script at one point, but I said no in a way, and I think that was the answer that the directors were hoping for, to be honest. And that was kind of it. We met in Cork, where I live. Lana, Lily and Tom came over just to meet, and I think, it was at a point where, as often happens, they were facing more obstacles with the studio, more obstacles with the budgeting, and they'd decided a kind of make or break thing with me, and I only found this out afterwards. If they sent their script, and if I didn't like it, then they would take this as a message from the universe that the film was not to be. But we met, and I liked what they'd written very much indeed, and I liked them. I liked their idea of foregrounding the reincarnational motif by using what films have that novels don't have, which is actors' faces, and having the same face in different genders and ethnicities and acculturations down through time, was just beautiful. I loved that idea. And it's just one of those small things, but we met in a hotel in Cork, and they were really nice, not only to me, but to the hotel staff. And it's always a bit of a red flag if you're on a date, for those of you young enough to be on dates. Just watch out for how the other person treats the waiter or the waitress. If they're short or abrupt with them, that's a red flag. But if they're respectful to them, then that's a green flag, I suppose. And the Wachowskis were really polite to people they didn't have to be polite to. And that is an inverted cliche in filmmaking. So that went well. and said, yeah, I love it. And okay, they went back and overcame the obstacles they needed to overcome. And then towards the end, I just got a phone call from Lana. I think her exact words were, would you like to come to Berlin and play dressing up? They offered me a short part in the film. No speaking lines, fortunately for the film, but yeah, that sort of helped to seal the deal. So I can say I'm in the film. So that's what I mean by a great deal and not a lot. Long answer to a short question. I will try to speed up, or we will be here till 3:30 in the morning.
I mean, you answered some of the questions I wanted to ask later. So
sorry. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, we can come back to it also. Yeah, that's no problem. But you also took part in the readings, I think, when
yes,
the
I
actors.
Did.
Yeah. How was it when you saw the actors to read the lines from your book?
Remarkable. So there's a first reading, which is the script is done, but before shooting begins, all of the actors assemble, like the Avengers assemble, and this was in Berlin, and it reminded me very strongly of reading The Crucible by Arthur Miller at school, which every English school kid of a certain age would have done at school, and we all have our little parts, or indeed reading Shakespeare, and it took me back in time to being in Mrs. Williams's English class in my little school in Nowhereshire in England, and but instead of kind of me and John Clark and Nick Porter and David Kite and Richard Moorhead reading the parts, it was me and then Tom Hanks and Halle Berry and and Jim Broadbent. That was quite dreamlike. You know, you have those dreams sometimes where none of the elements of the dream are particularly weird, but the juxtaposition of the elements are weird. So it's like you meet Gandhi, but you meet Gandhi in the cupboard underneath your stairs at home. That makes it weird. And so the reading was a bit like that. Fine, there's Hugh Grant, but then he's reading a line I'd written some years before, or that one of the directors had written. That was one of the joys of watching the film, actually. I was sitting next to Lana, who's a friend now, but there'd be a good line, and I'd say, is that one of yours, or is it one of mine? And it's one of yours, you dolt. So, if the collaboration is successful, I'm probably answering another question that you have on your list here, Ondrej, but if a collaboration is successful, it's successful because you don't know who wrote it. You really do kind of merge, kind of like the Borg in Star Trek. You kind of become this hive mind, and your job is to make the script as good as you can. If it works for that reason. It's because you've successfully left your egos outside the door. I certainly answered the question you didn't ask there.
Thank you.
Anytime.
No, I mean, I think one of the biggest differences is that the book is obviously written in beautiful prose, and it includes many archaisms, neologisms, and even an invented language in the post-apocalyptic episode with Tom Hanks and Halle Berry as well. So, and I think the language in the film is different. It is maybe more accessible to the audience. It obviously can't be like the book, and I think the question, I guess, is what do you think is or can be the cinematic equivalent of beautiful prose, or of these expressions that you use in the book, if anything?
You're asking about beauty in cinematic language and what makes it beautiful. That is profound, because when you hear a clip, when you watch a clip here, your ears are hearing the language, and that is how reality works. And that's one of the pleasing illusions of cinema. It is a simulacrum of reality. When you read, that doesn't happen, because novels obviously don't have loudspeakers built into them. the organ that is doing the hearing is the eyeball when you read. And the shape of the letters and just how they look on the page and the combinations that they are in. Hearing is visual when you read. You do have an inner ear, and sometimes you will activate it, but generally it's more you see speech. When we're reading our native language, of course you don't even read the words, you recognize the shape of the words, so you don't kind of M-A-P, ma-a-p. You don't do that. We know the word for map, and it's the same, of course, for native Czech speakers when you're reading Czech. So that's the difference. The beauty of written language is partly visual, and there is a conceptual layer. Here, I think the equivalent of the beauty of cinematic spoken language is it's in the hands or in the mouths and the faces of the actors. It's in timbre. It's in inflection. The work is done for you. It's done by the actor, and then which scene, which run-through of that line, the directors choose again in editing, in the editing suite. So all the work is done for you. And I guess it's more passive. But then when it's Jim Broadbent saying that line, you'll leave when I say you can leave. It's not a bad thing that the choice is taken out of your hands. I'm rambling a little bit because I've never been asked this question, and I don't have a ready-made answer for it. But it just makes me think how when we read a line in a page it's almost like a sort of quantum probability field. All the possible ways that line could be said, how it could be said, what emotion, with what emotion it could be said, whether it's said ironically or sincerely, all this almost infinite array, matrix, if you like, of possible ways this word could be said. That's what's on the page. Here, that Schrodinger's cat box is opened and it gets reduced to one, and that's what you hear. Now, I don't know if this is profound or rubbish. It could be either. But I think I'm probably barking up the right tree, which is a proverb in Czech or not?
I'm not sure, actually. Maybe it isn't. I think.
Can you say you're barking up the right tree, where you're kind of in the right area, but you don't know if you're exactly right or not? We just had a meal at a bistro and we're talking about our favourite Czech and English idioms and proverbs. This is why Ondrej is smiling, thinking, "Why me? Why me?" But back to you, sir. Was that an answer?
I think so. Yeah, it was a beautiful answer. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Is there something that can get lost in the translation, though? When you use the lines from the book and then use it in the film, and then you need to cut something maybe, or the meaning sometimes, because you also said, and I quote, and I will use this quote against you, when text slides towards ambiguity, film inclines to specificity. So in what sense do you think perhaps this film is more specific and less ambiguous than the book, if it is?
It's more specific about reincarnation because it can be, and it's an open goal. Films have actors, actors have faces. It's both an ingenious idea, and it would be a kind of it would be a form of self-harm to not use that. Is that a kind of specificity? Yes, it is. The reincarnational motif is a little bit vague in the book. It's there, kind of. Here, it's here, definitely. you asked a couple of questions. Lost in translation. My translator is here. My Czech translator is here in the audience. So this is almost a question for her. But I've done a little bit of translating myself with my wife from Japanese into English, and I learned how creative writers have it easier. We can be bad or good, but we can't be wrong. We can just be bad. Whereas translators, I feel, you can be wrong and bad. You really have it worse. It's a much harder job, and yet, of course, all translation is an approximation. There is no such thing as a pure, unadorned, direct translation. That's something that only people who have never tried to translate think. Even the pronoun for I in Japanese, there's about 8 of them, and it depends on gender and hierarchical status, and every single decision is loyally as in like a lawyer. You argue about it within your mind or with your wife, which is great fun. Every single word, every juxtaposition of words. So all translation is lost. However, and this is the big however, this is the whole point of it, beautiful things can happen in that lostness. And for whatever, this is a bit of an aside, but I'm interested in minerals, crystals, gemstones, and there's a particular one called labradorite, which is probably the same in Czech. Sorry, I keep half thinking that I'm in Hungary, only because the only city that Prague even remotely reminds me of is Budapest, but that's all. In Czech, labradorite is, would anyone know? It's this beautiful mineral. Thank you, sir. I could say it once more in case people at the back didn't hear. Thank you. If you know this stone, it's imprecise, and you look into it and you slightly alter the angle. This is one of my favourite words in English, chatoyancy. And it's the quality that you get in certain stones where they gleam. It's like a cat's eye. Literally, I think it's from French, kind of the eye of the cat. And when you change it, you get this inner light. That, for me, is translation. It's imprecise. It's not a nice, neat line. It's not binary. It's I can't put it in any other words. It is chatoyant. It's like labradorite. I must be looking like a raving lunatic here. I'm sorry if I am, but it's hard to talk about. It's words about words. I think you know what I mean. There is an imprecise beauty in all translation from one language to another, but also from one medium to another. Adaptation is translation from the written word to the spoken word, from the imagined image, from the images that words will gently nudge the reader's mind in an entirely individual, unique, discrete way. Every single time the book is read, it's a different face, it's a different scene, yet it's the same as well, because it's the same words that are making it. Whoa, what a quantum field that is. And that's just reading. But of course, in adaptation, that labradorite-like vagueness becomes a precise one thing. And where am I going with this? Something is lost, but something is gained. And that's why it's worth it. Whew, over. You're being really indulgent and nice. I mean, I'm so glad this isn't going out on live TV, because I would just look like I would have kissed my reputation. Good, speaking of reputation, mine would have gone with that answer. But thank you for kind of understanding what I'm kind of trying to say.
Yeah, I think you gave multiple answers, but that's because I asked also multiple questions. But then, yeah, I think we. Oh, thank you. I think we haven't touched on the ambiguity and specificity. Maybe the film, I think, brings some characters more closer to get together, and sort of synchronizes their journey, because it's structured differently than the book.
Yes.
The structure is a huge thing.
I'm a structure nerd. I'm a word nerd and a structure nerd and a nerd. I'm actually nerdish about nerdery. I'm a meta nerd. Cloud Atlas, one of the reasons it got noticed was this weird Russian doll type structure where I begin a narrative, I slice it halfway, literally in the middle of a sentence, then part 2 of the book begins, and then I do the same again. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, and then E part 2, D part 2, C part 2, B part 2, A part 2. That's kind of the structure of it. You can't do it in a film, because then you would be asking people to begin watching a film 6 times. The 6th time, halfway through the film, you would have a very empty multiplex by the end of the movie if you tried that. So it's like coming back to me now, but the metaphor for the creation of this film was Lego. They disassembled my Lego structure and reassembled it in a filmic, cinematographic way, as a mosaic. And what do I think about that? Well, they had to. That's what I think about it. And it was a smart solution to an intractable problem. There were other changes to the plot. Zachary and Merinim in the future post-apocalyptic section, they are a love item. But again, that just didn't worry me. Maybe it should have done, but they were respectfully following the logic of the film and being respectful to the spirit of the novel. And without naming names, adaptations often fail because they are too faithful to the novel, and the novel is not the same form. They're both narratives, but in many ways the similarity stops there. Novels are baggy, capacious, contrary, paradoxical. Obviously, the reader is in charge of time. The time signature, the way in the speed at which the narrative is concerned. And in all these respects, film is the opposite. They're not baggy. They're damned expensive. Every minute's costing $750,000. You've got to... you can't do what I'm doing now. You can't ramble. You've got to be super laser sharp. What else did I say? It's an unforgiving form. One mistake and kind of the movie is no good anymore. You can't go wrong, whereas novels actually quite like going wrong. Dickens is overlong, but he's kind of good because he's overlong. Dickens is a bit repetitive because he was publishing in magazine form, and often the individual installments of David Copperfield or Great Expectations, they'd appear a month apart from each other, so he had to remind the reader who this person was again. None of that in the film. The director is in charge of time, not the viewer of the film. So in many ways they're opposite art forms. So it's quite a sort of the translation distance is it's not as close as you and I. It's a couple of light years away. So it seemed wise to me to make those changes that, if they weren't made, would have impaired the film. That's what I thought about Was that an answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe one more thing, because we also, talked about authorship, and even in the clip, this was a theme maybe of the scene as well, because this is also one of the differences between a book and a film, where a book usually has one author, at least yours does, and a film can have many authors. And in the case of Cloud Atlas, there are several directors. So what I wanted to ask maybe was if there are any invisible authors of Cloud Atlas, the book, that aren't mentioned on the cover, but actually influenced sort of, or would you call them as an inspiration, or maybe co-authors of the book in a way?
Sure. This is a bit of a deep dive into literature here, but why not? All art comes from somewhere. No art comes from a vacuum, and I'm a bit suspicious of if I said no, it's all my own work, I'm the only and I'm the only author, I would be a bit suspicious of that. Every river has streams flowing into it, which sounds like it might be a proverb, but it isn't. One, the Italian writer Italo Calvino, who wrote a book called If on a Winter's Night a Traveller, and he was a big name, he's still a big name now, but I read that at university, and he does what Cloud Atlas does about 12 times. He starts a narrative, and after a few pages stops it, and then you go back into a sort of frame narrative about trying to find the next part of the story that you just had, but it never works, and you find another story, and at first you think, I wanted to find out what happened, but then the new narrative is actually really good, so you get into that, and then again he stops it. It's Scheherazade, basically, with a framing narrative. That was great, and I felt in that sort of way you can do with postmodern novels, you felt, you cheated. It's clever, but that's all it is. It's a good book, but that's my caveat about it. I always wanted to know what would happen if you recontinued those narratives. What would happen if you recontinued them in reverse order? So that gave me the idea for Cloud Atlas, which originally, by the way, had 9 parts, not 6. But then I realised that was going to be about 1,200 pages, and translators get paid by the page, and no one was ever going to pay to translate it. So sorry, or not sorry. Good, yay! 6 parts. So that's one, Italo Calvino. Then, who else? So I needed a linguistic model for each of the 6 parts, because the 6 parts are set in the 1850s, 1930s, 1970s, now, kind of the 22nd century and maybe the 25th century-ish. I think the film was more specific than I am. But certainly for the historical ones, I needed a model. So I chose Melville, Christopher Isherwood, Alex Haley, the author of those airport novels, kind of Jaws, did he write? No, he didn't write Jaws. What about A Coma? The sort of 1970s blockbuster airport novels. And then we're into the present, and I could just use me. and then we move into the future. I wanted to show how language keeps evolving, so I didn't want to write exactly as we write now. So the futuristic one is more. Actually, that used, another book that was huge in the 60s and 70s, Flowers for Algernon. Does that ring a bell? It's about someone who it's a sort of classic of behavioural psychology. A chemist invents a drug that makes a mouse super intelligent called Algernon, and then they use the same drug on a human being with a very low IQ. This is in the days when, of course, you can measure IQ, you can measure intelligence on a single scale like a ruler. Luckily, we're largely past that now. So that's essentially the plot for the Somni section, played by Duna Bay here at the base of the pyramid. And then the future, there's a book by a British writer, The the book is called Ridley Walker, and the author's name is, can anyone help me out? I can't believe I've forgotten. Russell Hoban. Russell Hoban. This is not obviously not a really famous book in the Czech Republic. It's really good though. Its moment of genesis came when the author heard an American, I think an Air Force general, boast that he was going to bomb North Vietnam back to the Stone Age. So the author took this and said, well, what happened if, let's do that for England. What about an England that got bombed back to the Stone Age, and we're now in the Stone Age? It's written in, I think, the early 70s it came out. And this is, he really, truly created a new dialect of English to tell this story. It's told in the first person, and it's this gorgeous, messy smorgasbord of language. It takes, for the first couple of pages, it's illegible, even to a native English speaker. But then, weirdly enough, you start to get the flow of it. Your eyeball learns the music on the page. And, well, it's much, much more hardcore than what I do in the book. Which is in turn more hardcore than what could realistically be done in a movie that's going to be played all over the world. But Ridley Walker by Russell Hoban is certainly one of the tributaries to the book. It sort of proved to me that you can do this. You can kind of out-Joyce Joyce in terms of creatively duplicating to modern day language what time will do anyway. Now, I'm speaking in a very different English to my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather or mother, who would hardly recognise what I'm saying. In turn, I'm sure the Czech you speak to each other would be a very different kind of Czech to what King Wenceslas might have spoken. So all I do is, and all one does when one is projecting or extrapolating what one's native tongue will be doing in a few hundred years, well, it's exactly that. You think how things might evolve. You take the way that language has changed in the last 50 years. I was teaching English in Japan, so all I did actually was just incorporate most of my students' mistakes in English and say, oh, that's what official language, that's now the right way to speak, because, of course, the words that we now think are normal English would have been baffling, mystifying neologisms to to speakers of a few generations ago. Isn't it cool how language drifts? It's like the continental drift, the way land masses move and collide and crush and form the Himalayas. Language is great.
Before we play the next clip, maybe it's a good time to ask you in the audience if you have some question, maybe regarding the topics we just talked about, or perhaps even something else. If so, yeah, you just raise your hand in there. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for being here. I want to ask if you think that some of the stories of Cloud Atlas are like more translatable into the film than others? Because I do. I think that some of the stories are like better in film than others. So just
yeah,
know
sure.
your opinion.
The Wachowskis did Adam Ewing and then the two future ones, and Tom did the Frobisher one that we've just seen, and
Timothy Cavendish?
Thank you, Timothy Cavendish, and I've completely forgotten the other one. The Louisa Ray one.
Yeah.
So their styles are different, and I think that's cool. It reflects the different genres that I try to make within the book. You're essentially asking if I've got a favourite, aren't you? Yeah. I love all my children equally, but you love some aspects of some children more than you love the same aspects in others, and those others have other things you love about them. And it's kind of the same for this. I will say about the Somni section, and I don't know if we'll be seeing a clip, that was a one I felt I never quite got right in the book. And certainly when I was on book tour, that went on and on, I learned pretty quickly, every time I tried to do a reading from that, from the Somni section, it just went down like a lead balloon, which is an idiom you probably don't have in Czech. What do you mean? You speak it. You can't just say, I don't know if we have an idiom or not. So you're a great user of language. No, I'm not going to take this anymore, Mr.
My brain doesn't work that fast, I think.
Okay. I preferred the film version to kind of my version. That really needed to be visual from the beginning. I never quite got the language, because the language is ascending, because she's getting new words each week, and it's and stuck in the damn first person again. My fault, but I couldn't quite get the language right. It seemed wrong if she spoke with imagery, metaphor, and simile, but then if she didn't, she just sounds like kind of the Star Trek computer. So I like that. One of my favourite scenes in the whole thing is the bit in the Frobisher section that's there in the trailer when the crockery just falls from the. I think that's more effective than in the book. I suppose what has to be lost is subplot and backstory. There's simply not enough room for it. That's what novels do really well. Manga does it well. But then that's long form. But yeah, that's interesting. In that respect, manga's more like novels than cinema. It's a big rambly question. No, I don't have a favourite. Yes, there are some things in some stories that really, I think, oh, you're just beautiful. Mwah, I think about. There's the Somni section. I prefer the film version to my version. Is that halfway decent answer?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and let's play the second clip.
We're going to watch the whole of the film this evening, but then we realised it was 3 hours long and it would be midnight before we got away. But it really is worth watching 2 or 3 times. There's things I still find. They're pretty novelistic filmmakers, as much as they can be. They put so much into every frame. You can't really spot it all on the first playing. And like the best books, they are the best books because you can and should reread them. I didn't even let you start. Sorry, Ondrej.
It's fine. So I chose this clip mainly because of the Louisa Ray storyline, which I think is, in this case, in this scene, is a good example of a use of a cliche, of a genre cliche maybe. And I know you love to talk about cliches and the inversion of cliches. And also in interviews you also use another term, that the cliche cannot be just inverted, but also, and I thought you or understood that you think it's even better than that the cliches are imploded, or it's a cliche implosion.
I've said that so often now that it's become a cliche. A meta cliche. It's a meta evening.
So yeah, so I was wondering, what's the difference for you between, if there is any difference between a cliche implosion and cliche inversion, and maybe if it somehow relates to this scene, or how does it relate to the Louisa Ray storyline, where we see this paranoid thriller, and then at the end of the first part we see first we see Javier, the boy, talk about this genre conventions and cliches, and you say exactly the same thing every character says before they get murdered, and then we see the fist, and then it's coming, and then it's not coming actually. So this is a cliche inversion, or how would you call it?
Is it an inversion or an implosion? Is there a difference? Probably I use the terms interchangeably, perhaps. But you can see it sets up an expectation, which is a form of, I guess if we were in physics, it would be potential energy. A ball is rolled up a hill, and then the kinetic energy spent rolling the ball up the hill gets turned into potential energy when it's at the top of the hill. So Javier saying, you realise you've just said what every person in an action film, da-di-da-di-da, that's rolling the ball up the hill, and then the fist is the declaration of the potential energy, and they don't spend it at once, they make you wait, they sort of segue into the future. This film, I can say without undue boastfulness, because I didn't make it or do it, it is a masterpiece of editing. I was often asked with the book, why is it a novel? Why isn't it just 6 novellas with this little split down the middle of each of them? And it's a key question, and it's one that I had to answer myself when I was writing it. And how do you bind those molecules together? For me, it wasn't easy, but theme is an obvious way. Each of the 6 parts is about predacity. Could anyone help me with that word in Czech? Because it's kind of key. P-R-E-D-A-C-I-T-Y. Predacity. Any takers? In a big loud voice, please. Thank you. Hey, she's my translator. Yes. That's one way to do it. Another way was the motif of reincarnation and the suggestion that the protagonist in each of the parts, or 5 of the parts at least, is the same person, and the way that every narrative is an artifact in its successor. So, for example, the Adam Ewing section is a book literally ripped in half that is found by the protagonist, by Robert Frobisher, the young composer. His narrative in turn is a sequence of letters that are sent to Louisa's friend here. She only gets half of the tranche of letters first time around, and then in part 2 she gets the next part. Within those letters again, these letters are contained within the airport novel, which is the story of Timothy Cavendish, and I've started, so I'll finish. That in turn is a film that Somni sees, and Somni is a fireside yarn that the Tom Hanks character in the far future is retelling, kind of like a bard of the future. So that was another way I could bind these 6 parts and justifiably say this is why they're one novel. None of those are. The filmmakers had to find different ways to bind it, and again they used the solution that cinema gives that the novel does not offer, which is editing. It's bound, and every ending, the ending of every scene is a kind of a door into the next one, and it might literally be a door. Someone walks in through one door, and then suddenly we're in a different world as a character walks through another door. It might be a word, it might be an expression, it might be a question, which then gets answered. But each time the scene cuts from one world to another, there's that kind of strong molecular bond from one scene to another, and it's got this flow and this electricity, and it's beautiful. I've completely forgot what you were asking, sorry.
About cliche implosion.
Cliche,
and inversion.
yeah, I got quite a long way from cliche there, sorry. Cliche implosion, I like cliches because they're not the enemy you think they are. Cliches are the fist. Cliches are something bad is going to happen here. A originality does not lie in the opposite direction of cliche. It lies inside the cliche, I think. You take the cliche, you don't run away from it, you take it and you change it ever so slightly, and suddenly it's something weird and strange and new and familiar, which is paradoxical, but that's novels for you. In fact, that's art for you. Paradoxes are beautiful. Cliches are usable resources, and yeah, use them. Just subvert them a little, go mining inside them a little bit, or rotate them a little bit, and something startling and rich and strange can happen, I think, as a general artistic principle to anyone in the audience who is interested in these things. Hey.
Yeah, you also, in another interview, you said that, and I quote, genre is a reliable supplier of lead, and art sort of transforms, is the alchemy, that transforms lead into gold. Is this something that you would, sort of connect to what you just said about cliches, or is it something else?
The problem with the internet is everything you ever say gets remembered and can be taken down and used as evidence against you, which isn't what you were doing, I know, Ondrej. Yeah, that's not a bad metaphor. I'll give it 3 stars out of 5, I'd say, if I was reviewing it on Amazon. And I still kind of mean it. Cliche is the lead that art can turn into gold. Genre.
Of course, there are genre cliches. I think,
Well, I think genre exists because of
cliche.
Cliche, yeah. And genre isn't a bad thing. What harm did genre ever do to anyone? It gets formulaic if you don't do something to it, but you can, and you can keep it within the genre. Genre comes with its stages and wardrobes and tropes, and it's familiar, and that can be an asset. It all depends on how you do it. All depends on how you use it. Genre and cliche, I'd say, is neither good nor bad. What is good or bad is what you then do with it. Is that an answer? Have I answered that one really quickly?
Yes.
Oh, that's a change. But I can see we're not going to run out of questions. Mate, you've got a whole essay there. That's amazing.
I mean, we won't use everything, but yeah. I mean, the whole Cloud Atlas is here. Yeah. Utopia is also a genre, but, not just a genre, I would say. I would say it is something that, again, appears in your work in some way, or is a part, utopia, as sort of an idealistic look at the world and fiction. And I guess what I wanted to ask is if you see Cloud Atlas as a sort of a utopia, and in what way?
Not just as a utopia. So I guess we can't talk about utopia without dystopia. Maybe you can't have one without the other. It's like heaven or hell, or maybe you can. But I'm interested in the dichotomy. Nice word for late in Prague on a Sunday night. The duality of them. I guess the first thing to say is utopia as a narrative is death. It's stasis. There's no stories in utopia. It's the end of stories. So utopia for a novelist or for a story builder of any kind is bad news. That's the first thing to say about utopia narratively in the dramatic sense. No utopian world fiction is ever a really good book. It might be an interesting treatise. It might be a good collection of suggested reforms, but it's never a good story. I've got a friend who said, an elderly friend who said shortly before he died, I hope I go to hell, because at least there I can get a pleasant climate and intelligent conversation. And that's what I feel about dystopia. The devil has the best lines, and dystopia is a cliche, or it's a genre with with many kind of oppressive cliches, but at least it has a narrative, how to change it, how to escape it, how to get out of it, how to do something to it or with it. And it's in our dystopian times, they sell really well. Hunger Games, that's your dystopian. It seems to gravitate to young adult fiction as well. And then, of course, when they're really good, they enter world literature and they don't get called science fiction anymore. Brave New World, 1984. Many others. Where am I? Utopia. I guess we're not really talking about my books or films anymore, really, but I think utopias are absolutely necessary. They're a kind of sat-nav for society. They give us a direction to head towards. Of course, you never get there. Utopia literally means nowhere, whereas we all live in a place with a postcode. And they're like these particles in the Large Hadron Collider that just exist for an infinitesimally brief moment, and then they're gone. 1798, there for a moment, it's gone, at least in Ireland. Somewhat earlier in Paris, maybe 1968 here, there for a moment, it's glimpsed. Okay, damn it, we should be building society should be this way, and then it's extinguished for a while. But at least it's there. It's absolutely crucial that it's there. I think it's something the human imagination does. If I was a big, bad, kick-ass neo-Darwinist, I'd say we're actually evolved to occasionally glimpse utopia, to kind of help us claw our way up Mount Civilization as a species. Now, we're also, unavoidably, to quote an eminent philosopher whose name has completely flown out of my head, but we are built from the crooked timber. Civilization is built of the crooked timber of humanity. So we're crooked, so our civilization's always a bit wonky and vulnerable. And this is the dichotomy, that word again. We glimpse it, but our means to get there are imperfect. But as long as we keep glimpsing it, at least we know which direction to head in. And with luck, Brexit, Trump notwithstanding, etc., 50 years go by, and something that seemed like some whack job, utopian, idealistic, impossible, unrealistic dream, this year by year, reform by reform, TV show by TV show, it gets normalized, and suddenly it's not okay to be homophobic anymore. I'd say that it's art that did that. It wasn't that our planet flew through a cloud of Enlightenment gas. It's ideas from the minds of people who write inconsequential little soap operas, put in a gay character, or there's a lesbian kiss or something, just moment by moment by moment. And I think, at least to my mind, and I would hope to the minds of many people here, things change in a more humane way, and we get a little bit closer to that utopia that was once glimpsed. And now it's our job to dream of new utopias, and for our generations, and from, well, I'm 52, so a few generations behind me as well, just to see how the world should be in a kind of more humane, utopian way. Suddenly I'm sounding political, aren't I? Vote Mitchell! Don't vote for me, I'd be terrible. But this is one reason I love my job. You get to glimpse utopia sometimes, and maybe just to, no, I am answering your question, to find a home for glimpses of utopia in your work, even if it's not a utopia. Just, you should also show the opposite. That's reality. Both it's a fractal morphing Venn diagram with one circle is utopia, one is dystopia, and there's the bit in the middle where we live and where art happens. But there's a place for all of them. Over.
you also wrote your MA thesis on the postmodern novel, I think.
I did, but I was a kid. I was 21. I knew nothing.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to, maybe stay political or even philosophical, in the sense that I think postmodernism may have something to do with the kind of disillusion that's, sometimes seem to appear in the world, in the sense that postmodern novels may be, cynical, ironic, very, full of distance, and also your books and are sometimes called postmodern. Is this something that you see as valuable, or I should say maybe is it something that rings true to you, or not? What's your maybe relationship to postmodern literature and its legacy?
It depends on what we might agree that it is. If postmodernism was an 80s thing characterized by metafiction, by fiction referring to itself, by multi-genre pastiche in books like The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco, or Milan Kundera, Unbearable Lights of Being, or what else did I do? Italo Calvino, Salman Rushdie, Midnight's Children. If that is what, or that one by John Fowles, The Magus. Those, I guess, were novels that kind of got cited as postmodernist novels back in the day. Now, if what we think postmodernism is kind of the subroute that those novels, kind of like a dot-to-dot children's puzzle, if postmodernism is that line, and it kind of ended, at least in fiction, in the 90s, and didn't really go anywhere, and maybe editors who were given postmodern novels just said, no, nice try, but we've had these already, and any novel that refers to itself being written with the author mentioning himself or herself, actually, let's be honest, mostly himself by name, in the act of writing the novel you're reading, it kind of lethally stabs itself. How could you possibly care about a book that is not playing the game, that what is illusory is real? It might be clever once, but it's a joke you can only tell once. It's a photon torpedo. You can only fire once, and after that, it's got nowhere to go. Now, if that's what we think postmodernism is, then the game was up by the time I was writing Cloud Atlas. Yes, for a short while, because of, I guess, the use of genre in that book. I was, in my early 30s, one of kind of young British Mr. Postmodern face for a bit. But it's been a long time since anyone had the effrontery to call me postmodernist, sir, until this evening. Now, is postmodernism something other than that? Is it a cultural tide that continues to this day? Has it got a legacy? Has it morphed? Has it evolved into something else? Have some of the more playful aspects where artistic tropes from earlier ages are still deployed and still used in a kind of sincerely ironic form, but that still have characters you care about, plots that are misleading and clever and fun. If this is what postmodernism has changed into, then sure, I'm really happy. I'm happy to be a postmodernist.
It's actually called metamodernism, I think. It's a
Metamodernism.
Metamodernism. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's this sort of new sincerity in postmodern. Yeah, It has a name, and I think you're part of that as well.
You see, I knew you'd have a better answer than me, because you are Mr. Cultural Observer. That's what you are, and sometimes you have a better view. Sometimes the zoologist knows more about the ecosystem than the animal trying to make a living inside the ecosystem. So you're the zoologist, and I'm the duck-billed platypus, who might be a fish or might be a mammal, but lays eggs. What do you do with that?
Again, we have a time for a question from the audience, if anyone. Okay. Can we get the mic?
There's a hand over here and a hand for this gentleman here, but we will come back to you, sir. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you too. So you talked about utopia and how you see this vision of a future that you want to have, and then you start writing and your words automatically can flow and become that. And actually, when I was reading your books, I very often had the feeling of optimism, because similarly to Cloud Atlas, there's a spiraling aspect of time. And as a teenager, when I was reading many of your works, I felt that whatever you do belongs somewhere in the spiral of recurring events, one following the other and leading to one another. And it all just made kind of sense. Then I even met some characters that were, for example, a character from the Bone Clocks was sorry.
You found your voice.
For example, the character from Bone Clocks was in the Black Swan Green, and vice versa. So I was following like this arches of recurring events and archetypes and characters. But my question, I guess, is why do you intertwine your stories so much? What do you think that gives to your narratives? And are you building this meta world that is one complete whole, all in itself?
Great, thank you very much. Why do I have characters in one book appearing in another? It's a mixture of planning and unintended consequences of design and happy accidents. So the reasons evolved. The first reason I did it simply because I thought it was cool when other authors did it. I thought, that's cool, I'll do that too. It was really that intellectual. Murakami does it, Heinrich Boll does it, Joyce does it, Shakespeare does it. In fact, the Greeks had a word for it. I think it's metalapsis, which is so cool. So that's reason one. Reason two, I noticed when I did do it, then if you've got character A from book A, and you read that narrative and enjoy it and like it and believe in them, and then character A appears in book B, then they don't come empty-handed. They come with a suitcase of associations and emotions and backstory. If the person upstairs could slightly dim the lights a little bit, I'm slightly I've got that. I'm being interrogated by a totalitarian interrogator kind of feel. If we just turn it down a little bit, I'd be grateful. Thanks. So that's reason two. If I re-employ a kind of disgruntled, out of work character from a former book, then they bring something else with them. The prime directive, a quiet Star Trek reference there, but the prime directive of the whole thing is that the book still has to work independently. I'm not writing a series. So even if someone's never read anything I've written before and never reads anything again, the book still works. However, there's still that gives you quite a lot of, that still gives me latitude to work with. Third reason, I realized by making this meta world, this multiverse, this Uber book, it lets me do two things at once. It lets me be a maximalist and a minimalist. When I was a kid dreaming about being a writer, I wanted to be, I wanted to make Middle Earth. I wanted to make something as big as Isaac Asimov's Galactic Empire. I wanted something huge, this great big cathedral of words I was going to throw my life into, and it was going to be Middle Earth, and I'd have Frodo, but I'd give him a name like Bozo, and he would sort of do a little quest, and that's what I used to dream of. I used to make maps. I used to draw those maps. of my own fantasy worlds. I wanted something big. Then when I was on the road to becoming that mythical being, a published author, I found actually I was interested in quite specific locations, times and places. I wanted to be a minimalist. The Dutch in Japan, this tiny little enclave that was so interesting because it was so finite. I wanted to be a maximalist and a minimalist, and this way of writing where there aren't necessarily clear ontological walls between my books. This lets me have that cake and eat it. Finally, I suppose, just to finish off, I've sort of got a sense this is giving me a free book. There are loose ends. There's, like the character you referred to, Hugo Lamb. He stopped aging in about 1992 and only started aging again in kind of about now. What would that do to your head? You're 55 years old, but you still look as if you're 28 or so. Then there's Nora Greyer at the end of Slade House. She sort of reincarnated herself into this recently conceived child with the mother of all boss grudges against Marinus. Like, she's still out there somewhere. So I've sort of got this Avengers Assemble kind of trajectory that these loose ends are heading towards, and it's some kind of war, but I haven't worked out what the sides are or what the war is about yet. But I kind of like I've got this growing sense of a free book being on its way. I call it a free book. It'll be murder to write, and it'll take me 3 years. But it kind of feels as if it's assembling itself. So that's 4 reasons. There might be more by the time we next speak. Thank you for your question. I hope that worked. Thank you.
Okay, so let's play the third clip, the final clip from Cloud Atlas. So the topic of this section, I thought, was connections. So I think it was, one of the beautiful scenes or sequences from the film where it showed how things are connected, how people are connected, obviously, through time. And we, through the last audience question, we sort of answered one of the questions I also wanted to ask you about how you connect characters across the novels. So yeah, we can save time actually. But yeah, good job. So obviously everything is connected in Cloud Atlas, but mostly it's humans, I think, that are connected to each other. Are there any non-humans that are also connected to the humans, or is this something that you thought about maybe
in my books?
Maybe
sure.
even your books.
Non-humans.
Non-humans.
Well, there's a Cloud Atlas music. I should say a word about the music here, just before we move on. Lana and Tom Tykwer, the indecently gifted Tom Tykwer, who can also compose, and with his partner Johnny Climack, made the music for this. They record it first. They record the music before the film is even shot, which is kind of unique. But from Cloud Atlas onwards, Lana's continued to use that method. And I think you'll see in the Matrix film, it just makes you realise how most film music is essentially helicoptered down onto the scenes by composing it first. It's kind of like it's like those old, rather dubious photographs of the Loch Ness monster, where it comes above the surface and then below and then above and then below. You find the music, kind of the score does that for the whole of the film. It's like always there, even when it's not there. And the films are edited to fit the music sequences. It's really clever. I was thinking of that here. And that's another of the ways that the mosaic of the film is sort of invisibly glued together, as well as it is, I think. It's musical. There's the music, there's, what else is there? There's the ship, the Prophetess. That's the ship that appears at the end of Jacob de Zoet, and it's still just around in the 1850s. And actually in the novel, it's like a floating maritime museum in the 1970s as well. That's a long-lasting ship. There's a particular cat which is always identified as the moon grey cat, and it appears once or twice in all of my books. Usually it's sort of like the hand of fate, or a moment of illumination. Actually, it's got a number of different things. It's sometimes a MacGuffin. Anyway, the moon grey cat. That would qualify as a non-human. I'll have to work on a few more though.
Does nature play a role in your fiction?
Does nature play a role in my fiction?
Do you connect humans to nature in some way?
I'd almost flip your question around and kind of say, how could you not? Nature, in at least its broadest sense, kind of the non-human world and the human world, they do interact. I'm a country boy. Of course, a 20th century, a country boy whose relationship would have been very different to a 13th century country boy. But by 20th century standards, I'm probably fairly... it was where I played and where I grew up. Was climbing trees in the woods rather than playing basketball in an urban basketball court. How was it for you out in Brno? Were you a country
I
boy
grew
or
up in
city boy?
Prague, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
But so I always was a city boy.
Yeah.
When I came to the small towns.
Okay. Can you give me another key to open your question? I feel like I haven't quite found it.
I mean, I think there is some reference to climate change in Cloud Atlas.
Sure.
I'm not sure if it is in the book as well. The sea rises and some of the
It will.
It will. Yeah. And I think your film is your book and the film as well is really good at showing us, how the consequences of our actions may not be witnessed by us or seen by us, but they nevertheless matter, in the future. And I think this is, a wonderful way to show the complexities of climate change, where you do something, but you don't see the impact, but there is an impact, and it is invisible somehow. So. So I thought about this in this way as well. That's there is, I think, this link between the connections you make in the book and their impact, even environmentally, maybe.
Sure. Thank you. That's a good key. Yes.
I mean, do you think about this, in a way when you write, maybe?
I suppose firstly I'd say that I sometimes sort of get congratulated almost for noticing that reality is an infinitely complex network of toppling dominoes, that causality is what existence is made of. And while I'm happy to accept people's congratulations, I also feel a bit fraudulent. I mean, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? I had a postcard from my dad, and I used to collect postcards, and my dad did when he was a kid as well, so he gave me his collection, and on it was this ship, and it was called it was a steamship, SS for steamship. It was a White Star. It was the White Star SS Cairo, and that was the name of the ship that took British people from Southampton, I think, to Bombay, as was then Mumbai now, and back. And my dad went on it as he was a kid, kind of to escape the war. My grandfather was a tailor, and he got a job making uniforms out in India for the army out there. So they went out on this steamship, and there's a little green cross over the cabin where my grandparents, my dad as a very small boy, was staying, and then the ship came back to Southampton. Then on the way out again, it got torpedoed, and I think everyone on board lost their lives. And I just always thought, well, if my dad had been on kind of one voyage later than the one he was on, I wouldn't exist. And I remember feeling that really viscerally. It must be one of my earliest memories. I must be 6 or 7 or so. It was a really archetypal, powerful, early lesson in the merciless, brutal causality of reality. One thing happens, this set of consequences begin. If this switch goes this way, then those don't exist, and these ones exist instead. And every moment is a potential torpedoing or otherwise of the SS Cairo. That's kind of how I... if people are nations and people like nations have founding myths, then this is one of mine. And it's an archetypal theme in my work. I see it again and again. Even when I try and, like a whack-a-mole, when I have kind of like a hammer and I try to hit it down, it just pops up somewhere else. This concern with causality, which is another way of saying interaction, connection, commingling. So I do think about that. It's not exactly nature, but if you take nature in its broadest sense, everything that isn't human, then sure. Regarding climate change, well, our presents don't just come from somewhere. Our presents come from our pasts. Our presents are trajectories that are launched upon by and in the past. And that's clearly true. The way the world is now is because of decisions that were taken last week, last year, in 1977, in 1968, beyond the war, before the war. It's kind of the sum total of all those little filaments that weave through time is now. It's the way the world is now. It's us all in this room. Infinite decisions that were made. Our parents getting together, if you know what I mean, or not getting together. That's why we're here. What's new now? What's interesting now is the ecological dimension. Our great-grandparents didn't really have the ability to mess up our climate for us. We do have the ability to mess up the climate, to destroy a civilization supporting climate for our great-grandchildren. And this is kind of new. And we aren't getting it right, are we? ... Over and out. Good night, everybody. It's been a...
Okay, I think we have time for another question from the audience. I believe, yeah.
There's a gentleman there.
That's the...
Hello, sir.
Hello, David. First of all, thank you for coming to Prague to
it's my
enrich us
pleasure.
with your thoughts.
I've had a great time. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Please come back when you can.
I'd love to.
Claude
You
Atlas
read
is-
so much. You're great readers in this place. I'm really bowled over. Anyway, sorry. Speak.
Sorry, I'll be brief with my question, but Cloud Atlas is my favorite movie, and I've seen it over 100 times.
Seriously, 100?
Seriously, yes.
100?
Yes.
Whoa.
I'm a filmmaker myself, so I used it as a sort of a study.
Oh, my word.
How to intertwine the stories. And the question goes to the creative process with the siblings Wachowskis. Because what the movie does, and that's obviously impossible in a book, is to bind the characters throughout the different stories with the same actor, but the actors are not only playing similar characters, but also similar sort of habits, and through the actor actually is connected the nature of the given person in a different story.
Yeah.
In the book, all the characters have different names. In the movie as well, but the fact that they're played by the same actor allows us to actually see the same person, even though it's a different character in both the movie and the book.
Exactly so.
And I wanted to ask if you've sort of talked with siblings Wachowskis about this process. If you've discussed how to actually do that, how to create this mechanism that's going to be that's going to create a movie, because I believe that there is 27 actors who play more than one role in the movie.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for your question. You've given me a massive case of imposter syndrome here. You should be up answering questions about the movie, not me, mate. And I will tell Lana that there was a filmmaker in Prague who's seen it more than she has. To answer your question, I didn't discuss what you're talking about with them, because it was already done by the time I arrived in Babelsberg studio in Berlin, where they had it all on the wall. Each of the characters has a karmic path, either from a low karmic position to a higher one, kind of like Tom Hanks's maybe, with a bit of a dip in Belgium, but things go wrong in Belgium. Sorry, I have a complex and loving relationship with Belgium. If there's any Belgians in the audience.
But then he also murders a critic in the next section. Then he also murders a critic in...
Oh, yeah.
So
Well,
another dip.
he was having a bad day. But yeah. I'm this far away from saying, but he was only a critic. But
I won't take it personally.
The ecosystem needs good critics, needs thoughtful critics who actually do their homework and know what they're talking about. So, present company accepted. Yeah, they've done it all. It was, and I wish I'd taken some pictures of it so I can prove it was there. But all of the characters, they kind of had a line, and it would go from a low ethical position to a higher one, or a higher to a lower, or it would kind of do a U, or it would do a mound, kind of an up and a down. They thought about it. They had thought about it more than I did, and I'd love to show you the pictures, but I can't. But you clearly can sense those lines in your head, I think. It was just ingenious. I was never really in any doubt that these that I wanted them to make the movie, since I saw how nice they were to the hotel staff. But if I needed sort of more dramaturgical reasons to be glad that they were filming this unfilmable book, then it was those karmic wall charts they had done painstakingly for each of the characters and had discussed for hours and days what the lines would be, where they would go, what the karmic ethical trajectories of all the characters were. They gave far more thought to the minor characters than I did when I was writing the book in my back bedroom at home. I think that's maybe that's one sign of artistic greatness, or a common denominator between all the books and the films I love. It's where the minor characters, they might have less screen time and fewer lines, but they feel as substantial, as three-dimensional or four-dimensional, as fully rounded as the major characters. Scenes in books where a character just appears for a couple of pages, but you feel as if they've existed, that they've had a whole lifetime before their lifeline happened to coincide with the main narrative, and they'll continue to have the rest of their life afterwards. You kind of feel it's there. All the great work, all the Russian novelists, for me, Chekhov even, where at most you'll be with a character for 10 pages. It's as if they've always been there and always will be there, unless they die, obviously, in which case, hey, shit happens. But and I feel that about the Wachowski's work and Tom's work. And I try to emulate that in my own writing as well. Backstories, there's not much room for them in novels, there's even less room for them in films, but if the backstory has been thought of and thought about, and if this character who might only appear for the blink of an eye has been considered to that depth by the author, by the screenwriter, somehow the reader or the viewer knows. You somehow feel it, even if you don't see it, I think. Yeah. I'd love to interview you one day, but I guess I'd best get on. But thank you for watching it 100 times.
Okay, so let's play the trailer for the new Matrix film as the last clip.
Future screenwriters. It isn't easy. Studios will break your heart. And it can take a long time between you having ideas and putting them down on paper and money ever arriving in your bank account. But it's worth it. There's nothing quite like writing a line. There's nothing remotely like writing a line and then hearing an actor deliver that line and putting inflections and nuance and tones and shades in it that you didn't think were there. That is the drug. So stick with it. It's worth it. Yeah.
So in terms of creative process, is screenwriting, obviously it is different than writing a novel, but in what way, at least for you?
I can only really speak from my own experience, and it's perhaps not. It's becoming more normal for novelists to write screenplays because of the streaming boom. All of the really good professional scriptwriters are already far too busy developing their own damn shows to ever work on yours. You've got to do it yourself because no one else will love it enough to actually hand in a script at the end of the option period. So maybe I'm not that unusual, but as a novelist, what I had to learn is to stop writing screenplays like a novelist. And I was overwriting kind of when I first started. What did I first do? Some episodes or some scenes for Sense8 for Lana again. I'd overwrite by about a factor of 6. She'd need a 1-page scene, and I'd write 6 of them. And I just did too much dialogue, too much description, too much everything. And as the years have gone by, and I've done more. Probably for The Matrix, I was overwriting by a factor of 2. So she'd need a 2-page scene, and I'd hand in 4. And now I've done a little more with another writing partner, and a little bit on my own as well. And I'm probably overwriting by a factor of 1.5 now. So I'm bringing it down and down and down. You basically have to strip everything away. It's dialogue and action and description, bare description of locations, and that's all. You have to go from being a novelist to a haiku poet. And good haiku is harder than mediocre novel. It's way harder. Because there's nowhere to hide. Everything has to be right. It's more like a short story, or more like poetry even. So I guess that's one major difference that being a novelist I've had to unlearn and then learn. At the same time, that's kind of liberating. If I have a storm in my novel, then I have to write the storm, I have to kind of describe the thunder and lightning, I have to find the cliches, implode or invert them, think of a new metaphor for the sound of thunder, can't do drumming, that's been done, damn it, the rumbling of train going by, I think I've heard steel wheels crossing the sky, it takes the best part of a day to do a decent description of a storm in a novel, but of course in this world, in film world, hey, it's not your problem. Just ext for exterior dot night dot a storm. That's it. That's all you have to do. You don't have to design every last damn thing. It's the designer's headache. So that's kind of good. And there's a beauty, and there's a, an accomplished string instrument player, a violinist or a viola player or a cellist. They play more than one string at the same time. Kind of they angle the bow in a particular way. It's a bit like that with lines in a script. As the gentleman who's a filmmaker will know, every line has to do more than one thing. And pretty much all the lines in the trailer, I can't tell you how yet, spoilers, but every line's doing more than one thing. They are polyphonic lines. And again, novels have the space in the room to not need that. In fact, novels full of lines that do more than one thing would get a bit Finnegan's Wake-ish, I suppose. But screenplays have to. So it's a different art. It's an intriguing art. There are overlaps. They are still made of plot, character, structure, style, and themes or ideas. They're made of the same thing, but the order that they come in on the totem pole are different, and the nature of the delivery vehicle is different. I'm not letting you get a word in edgeways, but it's fine. Is that kind of okay?
I have a quote here, and I think you're gonna like it because you like metaphors a lot, from the Polish author Jakub Żółcik, who told me a couple of years ago that for him, writing a novel, and I quote, writing a novel is like painting, and working on a script is more like architectural drawing. Would you agree with that?
That's a nice metaphor, isn't it? If I were reviewing that, I think I'd give that a 5-star. A 5-star metaphor? Yeah. Yes, I would. And I would add, I suppose I'd say, what about dialogue? I think it's completely true. And I would say that the dialogue has to be more than a thin graphite line on a page. It is a thin it is a pencil line on a page in that when I started, I made a classic beginner's mistake. I do the name of the character and then in brackets the adverb ending in ly. So ironically or wryly or sarcastically or angrily, that's got to go. It's not your job to tell the actor or the director how you want this line to be said. If it's a particular way, it should be obvious in the script. But even if it isn't obvious, something I didn't know about filmmaking, you shoot the same scene 15 times, and maybe 3 are no good. The actor forgets a line, or there's a cut, or someone's mobile phone goes off or something, or a helicopter goes by. But 12 of the 15 are fine. It's just they're said in different ways. And the director, particularly of the more dramaturgical type, will say, now say it more softly, now say it viciously, now say it as if you're a kid and it's Christmas Day and you're waking up. And they'll build up a reservoir of ways in which the line have said. And again, in editing, in post-production, they'll choose which one, and which one goes with the scene before, and which one goes with the scene after. So it's not your job to do that. So in that sense, it's like a line. But then, in another sense, lines need to they need to contain potential for richness. They need to do more than one thing. They need to. You don't get to choose what the colours and inflections are, but you have to kind of provide the potential paint box for the actor and the director to choose them. And then there's a line like when the analyst here says, "We don't use that word in here." No, that's not a thin pencil line. That's got history. He's said that before. That's got sort of wit. That's got psychiatric wisdom. I suppose the final thing I would say is, I think this is one of Hitchcock's remarks, but you only resort to dialogue when you've got no other way. When there's no alternative, then you could you tried everything else, then you can have a character actually say something. If you can do it visually, do it visually. Every time. Now, I don't know if every director in the world would agree with that, but it's a sort of screenwriting principle that increasingly I have tried to adhere to, and increasingly see the value of, the merit of. Yeah. Over.
Okay, so we have a time for one last short question from the audience.
The question will be short. Whether the answer's short or not, no, it doesn't matter.
Maybe regarding the new Matrix film, if there is anyone.
There's a hand up at the back there.
There is a hand at the back.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here and hear your wildly luscious stream of consciousness coming out in all these answers. It's great.
More stream, less consciousness from me, but thank you. I appreciate the sentiment.
It's cohesive, I promise. I'm quite curious about yourself as a writer and your own personal disciplines or patterns that you sort of provide for yourself when you're about to go down under into the world of your creativity. And I wondered if you would be so kind as to give us some sort of idea of what you do for yourself to hold that space.
Thank you very much. I will try. I suppose the first thing to say is I'm an ill-disciplined, undisciplined kind of person. I really am. But luckily, I do, as you can see, get this high from writing that I don't really find anywhere else. So I'm lucky to be an addict, addicted to the drug that happens also to be my means of earning a living. I probably had when my kids were in school, I think I had the record for being the worst dad in terms of forgetting to go and pick them up. I think I got into double figures. I'd just be working on a scene and I'd forget the time. And it's just, I just love it. Best thing about writing is when you work on a paragraph and you work on it and polish it and work on it, and the first time is rubbish and the first second draft's pretty rubbish as well, but you find this bit that isn't rubbish and you move it over here and you put an adverb in at the end and ending on an adverb with a comma, adverb, that's pretty great. And then, I'm going to keep you, whatever happens, you're great. But then this stuff over here, there's a repetition here, and how about this sentence is a bit long, too many relative clauses, I'm not Proust, how about put a full stop here, actually reverse them, this may be, there's more M's in this line than there should be. How about change this maybe into a perhaps? How the P goes down and the H goes up, you're nice. And you just go on like that, and there's a simile, a metaphor down here. It's got the word seem. I don't like the word seem. It's a bit sort of meh of a word. It either is or it isn't. Let's get rid of the seem. But this metaphor is only a 3-star it's only a 3-star metaphor. It's a bit cliche-ridden. Can I do something about this metaphor? So, the thunder, steel wheels. Now I've done that before somehow. I've had an old-style metal dustbin full of €2 coins being thrown off a parapet of a very high building, and it just smashes into the ground. Now that's what thunder sounded like on that day. Okay, I'll use that one. And do all of that, and then on a good day, you've got about a page of that, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I hope I don't have too many enemies, but even if I do, the worst of them, the person who hates my existence more than anything else on the planet, would have to look at this thing I've written and really begrudgingly, through gritted teeth, say, that's all right. That's pretty bulletproof. I can't get him on that piece of writing. All these other things he's done, complete despicable human being, but this piece of writing is kind of good. And just if you have a day like that, it is, that's kind of up there with Tom Hanks reciting one of your lines on screen. It's just great. There's nothing else like it. So my routine and my discipline is all in service of getting that kind of hit, getting that high. And for pretty much the last 3 decades, the final thought I have before I lose consciousness at night, every single night, is, where am I in that scene? What can I do for that? If I have this character, and I've gone. And pretty much the first thought I have every morning after seeing what the time is and seeing if what I've had qualifies as a decent night's sleep, or whether I should really go back and try and get some more from the sleep shop and say I've been shortchanged, is, okay, where am I today? What's the scene I'm working on? Oh yeah, that was there. And was there anything in my dream that I can use, or I'm immediately in there, and that's kind of my routine. More prosaic things, sure. I sit down. I mean, I've got responsibilities as a husband and as a dad, and as a citizen and a payer of bills, and as the guy who puts out the wheelie bin every other Monday when the refuse van comes, etc. I do these other things as well, but I need to sort of find the hole in the day where I can write and sit down, put some music on that is either instrumental or not in a language that I have any knowledge of, which fortunately does not cut it down that much, and write tea. Is it a Darjeeling kind of a day? Is it an Earl Grey day? Is it a green tea sort of a day? Is it a white tea day? Is it a rooibos tea day? What kind of a day is it? I get my tea and I kind of inhale the vapours a bit, and then I get going. I don't need discipline beyond that. That's kind of it. Thanks for your question. I hope that wasn't too barking an answer.
No, it was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, David Mitchell, for your beautiful, sprawling answers.
Oh,
and
do say that to all the boys.
And girls. And thank you everyone for being here with us and for your patience and attention. And yeah, have a great night.